But for my wife and I, it's Chevy Chase, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. How many guys, that's like a tradition in your house? Is this a movie, right? Ours is Black Friday after we've, gone shopping and gotten all the Christmas decorations out, which if you know my wife, that actually occurred November 1st, not the day after Thanksgiving. So I wanted to share that for us to have a laugh this morning to wrap up the Christmas season. And I hope that none of you had a turkey like that, because trust me, whew, that was bad. That was bad. But as we get into today and this time of year, I always take time to reflect on what this year was. And today I find a privilege just to get to share some of that with you. What 2014 was to me, what it was for my life, what God taught me in 2014, and hopefully provide some insight for you for maybe 2015. I'm a goals person. Anyone else out there a goals person? I've always been in business. I always associate myself with goals. Every time this time every year, my boss always comes and says, "Hey, what's your goal for 2015?" I always set the bar a little low, so that if I go over it, and it looks like, "Hey, good job," yeah. So everyone else here, come on now. We know, that's very true. But even at home, set the bar for what I want to get done around the house, or with the kids this year, things we want to go do. And for me, 2014 was a drastic change from any other year that I've had. God has taken me down an incredible journey, taught me a lot. I'm not too afraid to say this. As a grown man, made me cry a lot. Showed me some things about myself, about my family, and about who He was in a very real way in 2014, maybe than in any other time in our life. And I just want to share that with you today. But how many guys big into Christmas or New Year's resolutions? Any big ones? So I went on the internet last night, and I Googled top New Year's resolutions. Okay, I'm going to share them with you. Some of these I think are pretty funny. Number 10, we're going to count down 10 to 1. Number 10 is be more organized. Anyone agree to that? They need to be more organized at home, in life in general, be more organized. Number 9 was learn something new. I would like to learn how to, enjoy Asian food. I don't know. Learn something new in 2015. Number 8, reduce stress. I was surprised that was number 8, not number 1. Number 7 was travel. I would definitely like to do some of that this year. Now with business, I travel a little bit more than I ever have before. So my wife and I, this year, that was our goal. We got to go to Alabama and do some things for our anniversary. So travel is number 7. Number 6, spend more time with family and friends. Now for some of us, that might not be on our top 10. That might be like, the top 10 things I don't want to do this year. Just saying, after that video, maybe curtail the family down a little bit. No. Number 6, spend more time with family and friends. Number 5, cut back on alcohol or quit drinking. Number 4, start volunteering in an effort to maybe go inside with number 9, learn something new. Do some more volunteering, doing more in our community, doing more to give back to others. Number 3, get out of debt, save money. I agree with that. That's number 1, number 2 on my list this year. Number 2, quit smoking. And number 1, what do we want to think? Lose weight. I have to attest every year I created, that's my number 1, except I phrase it differently. I say I want to be less round. I've come to grips. My wife likes my roundness. So I always joked before that I just have to starve myself the last day of the year, trim 1 pound, and I've accomplished my goal of being less round. Number 1, less round is my New Year's resolution. Others lose weight. So as we look through those resolutions and we laugh, and some of them are serious, some of them are funny. We always laugh at the last one because gym memberships rise in January and plummet in February, and things of that nature, to where we always strive to do something better, something different in the coming year. And this is a great time period between Christmas and New Year's to really evaluate and look at some things. My goal for 2014 was to learn about margin. Now, I'm looking here. Okay, my boss isn't here, so I can say this. For 2014, in my position at work, I had to understand and learn what margin was. I'm not afraid to say it that when I took the job I have now, I had no idea what business margin was. I had no idea what that meant. I had no idea how that really applied to me. For me, it was always sell, 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 and someone else above me will take care of the rest. And this year in 2014, I wanted to learn specifically about business margin. But as I went through 2014, God taught me more about margin in general. He took it outside of business and took it in my personal life and showed me more and more and more about establishing margin in my personal life. And that's kind of what I want to talk to you about today. But first off, we have to have a working definition of what margin is. So on the screen, and if you have YouVersion, you can search live events. I created it, so type in the zip code 63368. It pulls up easier that way if you type in Crosshaven Church. So 63368 for the zip code, live event. Well, let's look at our definition here for margin. Definition for margin is a ratio of profitability calculated as net income divided by revenues or net profits divided by sales. It measures how much out of every dollar of sales a company actually keeps in earnings. For some of you, that's complete gibberish. Some of you are like, yeah, I had no idea what any of that said. But for some of us, this is our daily life. This is what our life is wrapped around, and our job is to create margin. Talk to any sales guy, any business owner. They can clearly tell you what this is. They can clearly tell you in their business what they're doing to create more profit. You know, margin is about buying something at price A, selling it at price B, subtract B to A, and that's your profit. That's your margin. And our goal in life is to, make as much margin as possible. And so when that's our working definition, we have to understand what margin is. We have to understand that there's times in life where we will do something that takes a lot out of us and we get a little bit back in reward, knowing that there's a long-term goal that will give us a much greater reward. For some of us, we invest very little or we make a huge reward on small things and we capitalize in that nature. For God and for me in 2014, I had a propensity to just shell out, and get very little back. And for me, God had to teach me in my personal life how to create that balance, to create a better balance of work life, of home life, of marital life, of being a father, being a neighbor, being friends. And it was amazing to me as I looked at this from a business standpoint, it made sense. But when I looked at my personal life, God really, really started to open up my eyes. If you would, if you have your Bibles, open up to John chapter 3. It's what we're going to look at today. John chapter 3 and verse 22. So obviously, any of us been in church for a while know John 3:16, the most memorized. First thing you always memorize as a kid, the passage are coming out of where Christ just had a conversation with Nicodemus and talking about many different things. But it says, I've come, God has sent me to love. God has sent me to be a scapegoat. God sent Jesus, his son, to die. So that's the conversation we're coming out of. We'll paint a bigger backstory here in a minute. But let's start here for today. John chapter 3, verse 22. It said, after Jesus and his disciples went into the Judean countryside, and he remained there with them and was baptizing. John also was baptizing at Aenon near Salem, because water was plentiful there, and the people were coming and being baptized. For John had not yet been put in prison. Verse 25. Now a discussion arose between some of John's disciples and a Jew over purification. They went to John and said to him, Rabbi, he who was with you across the Jordan to whom you bore witness, look, he is baptizing, and all are going to him, that being Jesus. Verse 27, John answered, a person cannot receive even one thing unless it is given from heaven. You yourselves bear me witness that I said, I am not the Christ, but I have been sent before him. The one who has the bride is the bridegroom. The friend of the bridegroom who stands and hears him rejoices greatly at the bridegroom's voice. Therefore his joy of mine is now complete. Verse 30 is where we're going to really focus in today. He must increase, but I must decrease. Read that again. Very simple passage. He must increase, but I must decrease. It's a simple scripture to understand, but it has an even greater explanation when we understand the backstory. We understand what's going on in the context of life right now with John the Baptist and Jesus and kind of where everything is. So what we have to understand is John was sent ahead of Christ to bear witness to Jesus as the Messiah and Son of God. The entire ministry, the entire reason that John was there was to proclaim and say, hey, someone's coming after me. That's the one you want to pay attention to. I'm just here to perk up your ears, to get you going, to get you thinking, to get you seeing things wrong. And I'm just here to proclaim that the one you've been looking for is coming behind me. And we see this in a couple of passages here. John 1, 6 through 9 says, there was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to bear witness about the light, that all might believe through him. He was not the light, but came to bear witness about the light. The true light, which gives light to everyone, was coming into the world. Luke 1, 16 through 17 says this, and he will turn many of the children of Israel to the Lord their God. He will go before him in the spirit and power of Elijah to turn the hearts of the fathers to the children and the disobedient to the wisdom of the just, to make ready for the Lord a people prepared. John's entire mission was to proclaim that Christ was coming. A commentator wrote this. It says, while John the Baptist was the agent of belief, Jesus Christ was the object of belief. While John the Baptist was the agent telling people about the light, telling people about Christ, Christ coming behind him was the object of what people were to believe in. John preached about the greatness of Christ. Many wondered, though, if John was Christ. So at this time in the life of John, Jesus' ministry is starting to take shape. The ministry of Christ is starting to take shape. He's starting to have conversations. People are being drawn to him. And so you have kind of this clash. You have John the Baptist who is leading the way, telling people that Christ is coming. Now Christ is here. He's doing his ministry, so they're doing this back and forth type of motion. And if anything in society, and we know when this happens, we can see it. You know, there's going to be competition. Okay? I remember in high school playing basketball, everyone compared themselves to others, and there was always guys that would lead the pack, and you would see it go back and forth, and then kind of came to a clash. You know, we finally faced each other, and you were gonna see who was the better player. You're gonna see then who was gonna come out on top, who was gonna be the one that everyone says, yeah, he's number one, he's number two. And we have to imagine right now in the life of John, and this is where he's at. People are saying, are you Christ? But then again, there's this other guy that's coming and starting to baptize and do some things that you said would happen, but is that really the one we're supposed to be watching out for? Are you sure that you're not the one? And people had these questions and these doubts, and this competition was brewing. In fact, in this passage that we just read, it was really about people trying to pin John against Christ and trying to pin John and make John jealous and say things to go against things that he had already said about Christ. And I love John's response there. And it says, I must decrease and he must increase. I must decrease and he must increase. John 3:28 says, "You yourselves bear me witness that I said, I am not the Christ, but I have been sent before him." Let's kind of look at a couple of things that Christ, when we talk about the popularity, was rising to an understand of where, and we see John's side. Now let's look at where Christ has come. At this point, Jesus has already turned water into wine, first miracle. He already started to gather his disciples. He already cleaned the temple out during Passover, turned the money tables over, and cleaned out the Passover, cleaned out the temple, kicked everyone out. And then just previously in this passage in John, he had a conversation with Nicodemus. Nicodemus was a Pharisee. He was the ruler and the teacher of the Jews. And he comes to Christ at night and asks him questions. Are you really the one? Are you really who we've talked about, who we've been looking for? At this very passage in verse 25, John's disciples were having a dispute with Jews regarding purification. But really, they're just jealous and trying to get some turf war, like I said, started. Jesus, at this point in this conversation, Jesus is not that far away from John. So when we say turf war, it's like in that day, they're not that far away from each other. They're a couple miles. Not far physically away from each other. So you can see where this point in life that John has a choice to make. He knew his purpose, he knew his calling, he knew what he was supposed to do, but he's being confronted at that point in life with a choice. And for so many of us, this year might be that year. This year might be the year we have to make some choices. This year might be the time where we have to make some decisions that are tough that maybe we've been putting off for years. Maybe we've been putting off for decades. But things have to change. We know that God's changing your heart, changing our hearts to do something different. And we're at a decision point. We're at a point in our life to where we have to decide which way we're going. That's where John's at. But here's what I love when it's said about John. He could have been jealous at this point. John could have been jealous. John could have tried to stir up a bunch of strife, could have been a distraction. John could have said, you know what, I was supposed to do this, but I really like the popularity I'm getting. I really like the notoriety. I really like what people are saying about me. He had every right to do that, and he said, no. I must go away. I must fade into the background, and this is the time of Christ. So what does this have to do with margin? What does this have to do with our life? What does this have to do with where we're at? Point number one today, as we look at this, to understand the margin in our life, we must first understand our purpose and our goals. We must first understand our purpose and goals. For my life, in the last 10 years, I've had one purpose, and that's to tell people about Christ. I've had one goal. That's the goal of my life. That's what God has called me to do. What God called all of us who are Christians to do. To proclaim the good news. To proclaim His Son. To proclaim that we are not good enough. It's only through Christ and His death on the cross that we can go to heaven. That's what Christ has called all of us to do, to tell those who haven't heard. That's what I've devoted the last 10, 12, how old am I? Yeah, since I was 18. That's a long time ago. So that's been my life's goal, my life's drive. We have to understand our purpose and our goal to understand and even begin to look at what's going on in our life. We could all have number one to, in those New Year's resolutions to lose some weight. We could all say, yeah, that's what I want to do. Okay, you set a goal. Now, how are you going to accomplish the goal? You're like, oh, well, I'm going to exercise my thumb, right? I'm going to exercise my thumb, or I'm going to exercise my jaw. We say ridiculous things. We could say we want to do things, but unless we take a step and an action to actually do it, it's just a meaningless goal. For us to understand margin, we have to understand the mission of our life. John understood the mission of his life. And at this point in this passage, he had a decision. He had to either get on with his mission or become a distraction. He either had to decrease so Christ could increase, because you can't have two positives, right? You can't have two negatives. It has to be positive and negative. And at that point, that had to happen. We have to understand our mission. We have to understand our calling in our life. Number two, we have to establish margin. We have to be honest and evaluate our life. To establish margin, we have to honestly evaluate our life. This is a painful process for me this year. This is painful. This is part of the crying aspect of admitting some faults, admitting some failures, admitting some areas of my life that I was not measuring up to where I needed to be. I took a real honest assessment of where my life was. But first off, I had to establish what my goal was, what the purpose was for my life. And then I had to evaluate myself against that purpose and that goal. To establish margin, we have to be honest. We have to evaluate our life. For some of us, Jeremy's not, I already talked to him about this, so I'm okay. For some of us, we need to decrease ourselves from involvement. For some of us, to establish margin, we need to learn to say no. Agreed? Okay? When it comes to, involvement even within the church, we need to learn to say no, because our life is not balanced. Okay? Our life isn't balanced. For some of us, though, we need to say yes. We need to engage. We need to do something. We need to get off our duff and get going. Some of us have so much that we can offer, but we just sit there. Wait for somebody else to pick up the slack. And then for some of us, we pick up all the slack when we just need to let the slack drop sometimes. We need to let others have the opportunity to do different things. And we could correlate that to church, but I want to have you really correlate that in your own life. How many times do you really need to say no instead of saying yes? And how many times do you really need to say yes instead of saying no? Excuses, right? We all make excuses one way or another. We make excuses. Whether it's an excuse to do something or an excuse not to do something. Right around Thanksgiving, we had the night at Haven, I guess it was before Thanksgiving, and Jeremy challenged us all to do something different during the Christmas season and invite friends for last Sunday, and the numbers spoke for itself. God showed up in a real way last week, just in the number of people that were here. And I pray that during the Christmas season that you did something different than you haven't before, that you didn't say no, that you said yes. Our neighbors shared a story with us of this year. They didn't put all the Christmas decorations up. They were actually really minimal. And they got tired of their girls constantly saying, I want. And they said, we're not going to give you everything you want. We're going to go work in a soup kitchen. We're going to go volunteer here. We're going to go volunteer there. They wanted to establish within their kids what the meaning of Christmas was. It wasn't about getting and getting and getting. It was about giving. And how many of us, we are consumers? We just get, and we don't ever give. But then how many of us give, never get? So to establish margin, we have to be honest and evaluate our life. We can't put out everything and get nothing in return. Because what happens, you get burnt out, you get mad, you get frustrated, and you quit. You get depressed, you get anxious, you get mad, you get resentful towards others. That's not an equal balance. So to establish margin, we have to honestly evaluate our life. And number 3, to establish that margin in our life, we have to submit. So once we've established our purpose and our goals, once we've established and honestly evaluated our life, through that we establish a plan to put in place to accomplish that goal. And then we have to submit to that plan. How many of you guys are good at submission? Yeah, me either. I don't like to submit. I'm hard-headed. I want to do it my way. You know that my way or the highway? There is no highway. It's like my way or no way at all. And through 10 plus years of marriage, I've learned to submit. What is her way is my way. What is my way is her way. Well, I said that backwards. You get the point, though. Okay? I've learned to submit. I've learned to give in. We've learned to understand what each other's strengths are and weaknesses are and submit to each other. And I've had to do that at work. You've learned that the hard way at work, to submit to the boss or those that are in charge. Even though you might have the best way to do it, God still calls us to submit. And for number 3, to establish that margin, we have to submit. We have to understand. We have to relinquish control. Submission, though, is not seen as being weak. It's a sign of strength and respect. To truly submit, it cannot be seen as weakness. It has to be, it's really the biggest display of strength. Anyone can buckle up their arms and can dig their feet in the sand to say, no, I'm going to do it this way. But it's harder for people to say, no, I'm going to go with you. I'm going to submit to your authority. I mean, Lord knows, how many of us with small kids, right? This is a daily, hourly battle. I was blessed. Many of you know from Facebook that I was blessed this week. My mother-in-law took my kids on Christmas night. I had 36 hours of no children. Amen. Best Christmas present ever. I got 18 hours of sleep in those 36 hours. The whole house could be on fire, and I would not have known. Okay? With our kids, we try and teach them submission. We try and teach them I'm in charge. But we ourselves also have to realize that we're the child of God. We have to submit ourselves to His control. If you look in your notes there, James 4:6-10 says, God opposes the proud, but shows favor to the humble. Submit yourselves then to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. I love this passage here. Come near to God, and he will come near to you. Wash your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Grieve and mourn and wail. Change your laughter to mourning and your joy to gloom. Verse 10, humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up. Come near to God, and he will come near to you. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up. It doesn't say anything there about, I'm going to continue to strike you down. It doesn't say anything there about, give me control and I'm going to make your life miserable. God doesn't promise all roses and the best things in life. But you know when you've submitted to God and you're going through a hard time, you still have a smile on your face. You still know there's a purpose behind it. You still know that he's walking right there with you. Matthew 6:24 says, no one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. You cannot serve both God and put in your blank. Whatever keeps you from submitting to God, put in that blank. Work, kids, family, hobbies, all of which are great things. But if they're not done in balance, There's not a margin in your life. You can't serve God and blank. I had to learn that this year. Did. I was doing all these things in the name of God. As Jeremy said, I've been a youth pastor, I've been a worship leader, been a church planner, been a pastor, you name it. I've never worked with kids. There's a reason for that. Okay? So throughout these last 12 years, I've done all these great things in the name of God, for God. But until this year, I don't really feel like I ever established margin in my life with that. It was all that and a little bit of family. It was all family and a little bit of this. And this year, God really helped me see to establish margin to where I said no a lot. The things that I really felt that I could do and should do, but I said no. I said no to opportunities that people were like, you're crazy, you should do that. It's not where God has me right now. When I did that honest evaluation and God pointed not holes in my life, but holes in my life, and I had to confront those this year. I still am. This is a work in progress. This isn't a 2014, I made it. No. I am still and will continue to battle through things. Sometimes it's God and I doing this. Sometimes it's the wife and I doing this. Sometimes it's the kids and I doing this, or work, or church even. But 2014 to me was a year to understand balance, understand margin, understand giving and returning. When Jeremy asked me to preach, I wanted to run from this message so many times. Even this morning when God woke, 4:30 in the morning, I woke up and my mind was being flooded with all these other things, and I could tell just in my spirit, I was like, this is a distraction. This isn't God. This is Satan trying to distract me not to stay the course with what I know God has for me to say. And so this is a constant battle. When we look at our life and we honestly evaluate it, it's not going to be fun. Or it could be awesome. We could look at it and say, look at where God has taken us from. Look at where this year started and where this year ended. Look at the job progress. Look at the family progress. Look at the physical move to a new country. Look at the church move. Look at the friends I've gained, friends we've lost, relationships started. And look at the progress and see how God's taken you from one place to the next. And for 2015, say, hey, what does God want for me this year? I can't answer that question. Only you can. Only you can. Others can say, well, I think you should do this. I think you should do that. But be careful. Sometimes that's the voice of God, and sometimes that's confusion and chaos trying to take you down a path you're not supposed to go. So one thing I love about past, Gary, it was something that Gary said, and I made a note of it, and it was a path. When you go down a path, no matter how windy, how twisty, how narrow, how wide it gets, the job of a path is to take you from a starting point to an ending point. Get on that path. Whatever that path is for you this year, get on the path. Let it take you, constantly move you. There's going to be times where it's grand, it's great, it's a 6-lane highway and you're the only one on it. And there's times where it's going to be just not even wide enough for you to walk through sideways. You're working hard to just take another step. That's been what 2014 was for me. That's what this year was. My challenge to you is, what does God want to teach you this year? Does God want you to cut back and invest more? Does God want you to say no? Or does God want you to say yes? Is God presenting opportunities for things he wants you to do and you keep shooting them down because you're like, that's not my plan? But it's very obvious that he wants you to engage. Maybe for the first time in life, you learn to disengage some. What margin does God want you to establish in 2015? What does he want you to establish? What does he want for you? So if you're standing on the stage next year and you can say, here's what 2015 was for me. This is how God did some incredible things in my life in 2015. Everyone has those Facebook year-end reviews. What's your year-end review going to look like next year? What is God telling you to do right now? What's the goal, the purpose that God has for you? I challenge you to establish that purpose, to evaluate your life, and to submit to what God has you to do. Let's pray. God, I just want to thank you for today. I just want to thank you for this time we could come and the opportunity that you gave me just to open your word. God, I thank you for this year, the ups, the downs, the good times, bad times. Lord, I look forward to what this next year is going to bring, what you're going to continue to do in me, what you're going to continue to refine, what you're going to continue to shape and mold. God, just continue to show me your purpose, your mission. It's my prayer, Lord, that all of us here will look at 2015. All of us will look at this new year not as a time to make a resolution that we have no intentions of keeping, but that we'll take a look at this year and say, God, where do you want me to be? What do you want this year to look like? God, I pray that in this room that we would submit to that. Maybe some of us for the very first time says, God, I'm going to submit to what you want. No matter the consequences, I know that your word always promises to provide, to protect, give us what we need. Lord, I just pray that we establish that in you. Not in others, but in you. And every aspect of our life, we're following your purpose, your desire, because only then can we grow. Guys, be here with us today. First name we pray. Amen. We'll go ahead and stand.